Hello, this is Erin Kiger from EduCoaching Partner, and I am your partner in all things education coaching. I'm here today to talk to you very briefly about routines and procedures, and this is our very first back to school series micro webinar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right in and get started. If you are watching this recording and you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I am on Twitter and Instagram at EBG Tech, and you can also respond to the email that you receive this recording in. So let's get started. Routines and procedures. So first, let's very briefly talk about what is the difference between a routine and a procedure. So a routine is that overall process of the day. So we're talking your schedule, your academic schedule, reading, math, writing, that sort of thing. When is lunch? That routine, that pattern throughout the day. The procedures are drilling down to make sure that the elements that are happening throughout each of those components of your day are going smoothly. So we're talking about how do students enter a classroom? And if you're in middle school, high school, that is going to look different for different teachers. How are your students going to be getting their materials? And so we will talk about some of those pieces as well. But I want to make sure that I went over the two different things. So what are all of those little details to make a procedure successful? And then each of those procedures build into a larger component that makes the whole routine of the day. So in talking about routines and procedures, we're going to talk about the preparation to make things run smoothly. So we're going to talk about those explicit expectations. We're going to talk about implementation and gradual release. So those are all of the things to get our procedures up and running. And then we're going to talk about 4 different great first days, not necessarily the first day, but first days procedures that you could consider implementing in your classroom. So let's talk about explicit expectations. So when you are going over procedures with your students, you want to make sure that you're breaking everything down step by step. The older your students, the more steps you can take, but you don't necessarily want to lay all of those steps out at once. And we'll go over how to kind of practice those procedures and breaking down those steps. But when you have littles, you want to make sure that each of those steps is very incremental, very small, couple of steps at a time. And you want to be very explicit, like, this is what I need you to do. This is what I will be doing. Make sure that you're going over what students will see, what they will hear, what they should do, what you should do. How do they know when to go into this particular procedure? How do you know when you're done with this particular procedure? Like, all of the sensory input and output, all of that should be communicated with you prior to, and then you're going to have some opportunity to practice that. So making sure that those explicit expectations are communicated multiple times is going to set your students up for success. Implementation. So this is where I talked about first days. And so what you're going to do is, before those first days of school actually get started, before you see your students for the first time, figure out what are the things that you want to roll out on day 1. What do you want to roll out on day 2? What do you want to push to the end of the week, the second week? You know, when you first walk in, first day, you definitely want to cover, how do I walk in? What is my expectation as a teacher? What is your expectation as a student? And what are we going to do about that? How are we going to make this go smoothly? Am I going to greet you outside in the hallway? Am I going to be inside? Again, some of those things we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, but you're not necessarily going to be introducing the idea of small group work or centers or independent work even, depending on the age, in that very first day. There's going to be a lot of doing things together and just the basic procedure of, what do I need you to do in order to be a student in my classroom? And then we can start rolling into some of the content areas and how that looks. So just keep in mind that before your students join you in your classroom on that first day, it's a great idea to know what procedures you want to implement. I would say the first 5 days. After that, you can kind of roll with it once your lesson plans are created and once you have an idea of who your kids are and how they need to be supported through the process. Gradual release. So this is very much an academic term, how you teach. I do, we do, you do. And so what this does is we take this academic concept of how to instructionally provide support to our students to teach them content, and we just apply it to procedures. So this is how we're going to teach our students the procedures. So we're going to take a couple of steps. I'm going to do it. I'm going to model it for them. I'm going to model it for them the very first time, probably 2 to 3 times, depending on how complicated it is, possibly 5 times. That's a little bit extreme, but if it's a very short thing, I'm going to say, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to open this up. You get the idea, right? And I would say that was for very littles. So the idea is you're going to do it, and then we're all going to do it together. And that way, as you're doing it, you're walking around and you're seeing who is successful, who needs support. Then you're going to say, okay, I want you to try to do these couple of steps. And again, as they're doing it, you're walking around, seeing who gets it, who needs support. Hopefully, by that point, they've got it. Check, we're done for the day with that. Except we're done with that part for the day. If you're going to see that again, if your students are going to see that procedure in another hour, you're probably going to want to at least start with the we do and then the you do. And then the next day, you're going to want to try to do an I do, and then a couple of we do's, and then a you do. It's very gradual. There is not an exact formula. There's not a specific number of times you have to practice. It's just like with academics, with content. See how your students do. If they're grasping it, if they're doing really well, go ahead and release sooner. If they need to practice some more, you do some reteaching. You can go back as many times as you need to. I will let you know that a lot of the procedures that you teach and that they master at the beginning of the year will probably need to be retaught after long weekends, after longer breaks in the spring, in the fall, after a fall break or after winter break or after spring break, probably revisited right before school gets out. But the idea is you keep gradually releasing them. You keep bringing them back in, practicing, and then letting them do it. All right. So now let's talk about what are some really great procedures that you want to consider implementing in those first days of school. So think about entering and exiting. And it's not as simple as it sounds, entering the room and exiting the room. There are so many components that you as the teacher need to have planned in your head so that you can provide that explicit expectation. So when they enter the room, again, like I said, are you going to meet them in the hall, or are you going to be in the classroom waiting for them? Is there going to be a high five? Is there going to be some sort of an entry for hot lunch or cold lunch? Is there going to be some sort of ticketing system to let you know that I'm here for the day? Any of those things. Do they need to go to their desk first? Do they need to unpack? Do they need to turn in homework? Think about all of the things that you want a student to do when they're coming in. Put it in order, and then make sure that as you teach that procedure that you break it down. So you need to come in and you need to go to your desk. You need to come in and you need to hang up your backpack. And then you go through that gradual release. Exiting is the same concept. Think of all of the things that they need to do before they leave your classroom. Turn in their assignment, put it in the book bag, pack up. Do they need to put away supplies? Do they need to stand and wait at their desk? Do they need to go and line up? All of those pieces are part of that exiting procedure. You figure out what you want, put it in order, and then practice that. I will tell you, with any procedure, if it doesn't work for you and your students, you can always redo it. You can always reteach them. They will get it. You don't want to change it every week, but if something is not working, find a way to make it work. Figure it out, change it so that it works for you and your students. So materials, we're talking about throughout the day. Do they need to constantly go and get a new pencil? Do they get to go sharpen their pencils? Where do you keep crayons? Where do you keep extra supplies like paper, pencils, charging cords? If they have a Chromebook and it's dead, do you provide that extra opportunity for them to charge it? Where do they put their backpacks? What materials are you providing? What materials are you expecting them to bring in? And where do you go in their desk, in their backpack? All of these pieces, you go over each piece with them. I do, we do, you do. And you'll do it for multiple days until it is a procedure, until it is a habit for them. Transitions. So we're talking bathroom, tissues, anything outside the norm, running an errand for you, going between classes, fire drills, all of those things. You need to figure out what are the steps that you want to take, what are the steps you need your students to take, because things like fire drills, those aren't really in your control, but your students still need to practice it and you still need to do the gradual release to make it a smooth transition. So what is happening throughout the day that is a in normal, and even like around the room? Are you transitioning from math? Are you transitioning from writing to going to PE? Whatever the like, how do you have your students transition from subject to subject? And then providing instruction. Okay, how does this look for you in as far as direct instruction, small group instruction, and independent instruction? These are also things that you want to consider. What is your expectation? What is your explicit expectation when you are providing direct instruction? Are they at their desks? Are they on the carpet? That's not such a question for some of the older groups, but that can still be part of your day. And you want to make sure that you are explicitly providing your expectations and the directions for what that transition might look like. What's your expectation? What's your expectation in as far as when they're working with a partner in a group? And then also independently, are they allowed to whisper? Can they get up and ask you a question? Or do they need to have some sort of signal on their desk or raising their hand or anything like that? So you have those expectations in your head, break them down into components. And then once you've broken them down, make sure you put them in order and then teach them incrementally with I do, we do, you do. So that is our very first micro webinar for routines and procedures. We will have another one in 2 weeks and it will be all about parent communication. So I look forward to seeing you. And again, I'm Erin. I am your EduCoaching partner. Thank you so much. Have a great day.